Ooh. This is the 8-9 combo. I'm Brett McKay. This is Harry Jones. And it wasn't quite the same Southern Hemisphere domination this weekend just gone, mate, but a good weekend of rugby nonetheless.
How's it, Brett? Yeah, it's interesting because a lot of our podcast chemistry has been built on a sort of the woeful Wallabies and the annoyingly ascendant Bucks. And suddenly these plot lines have changed. It's a bit like the nations in general in rugby. England is the new Scotland. It's plucky and brave that they find a way to lose. New Zealand is playing a bit like South Africa, and South Africa is playing a bit like the old New Zealand. And Australia could literally change positions with Ireland by the end of this thing. It feels like we might end the autumn tour with Australia being right there and Ireland being in what's happening to us, depending on what happens next.
Yeah, and that's kind of apt because, I mean, and we will get into the performance against Wales, but the more we see the Wallabies under Joe Schmidt, the more they're looking like Ireland of 3 years ago, aren't they? Yeah. So, it's been really interesting to watch. No question about that. We're up to episode 41 of the 8-9 Combo Rugby podcast, and it's been another big week of numbers for the pod. Charlie Morgan last week into our biggest games of the week of the Northern Spring Autumn Series tour that we've had. And then, of course, the double banger test match post-mortem on Sunday that covered off England, South Africa, and France, New Zealand. So thank you all for getting around all that. Let's get into the rugby week again, mate, with cheers and jeers from the weekend. You are up with cheers. What have you got?
I cheer, I applaud, I commend Steve Borthwick, the embattled England head coach, who sua sponte, I will say this, sua sponte, spontaneously, without any urging, without it not being part of the question, brought up the full support of the board. So this is a wrinkle.
Himself.
We've always, we know that when the board says it, it's bad, but what about if the actual coach just brings it up spontaneously out of the blue? And he also
that's going to be worse, surely.
He also criticized the players' fitness. Now, bear in mind, because of this new contract they worked out, to the tune of £274 million, he was able to secure 17 long-term contracts of players that are bound to RFU, and therefore he had more control over their fitness than any other coach in World Rugby. And he was still questioning that. So I cheer the balls and the brazenness of Steve Borthwick for going ahead and telling the board that he has their full support.
That's just inviting the board to go, so about that support.
On that. Full. What is the...
Yes.
Scintilla less than full. Yes.
Yeah. Steve, let us assure you that we do indeed have our full support. Cheers for you, mate. And we have kind of touched on this between us or over our socials, or I don't know, we may have even talked about it in Test Match Post-Mortem, but I'm still getting over the end to that Ireland-Argentina game on Friday night, and I'm still yet to see the ball bobble at the back of that ruck. And never mind what caused it to bobble, I'd still like to know what Paul Williams saw. And it may well have been an Argentinian knock-on. Let me put that out there. It may well have been. Their reaction certainly suggested otherwise. But the point is, we never got to see it. And we still haven't seen it a couple of days later, which really surprises me, I've got to say. So, like you have said, it's just not a satisfying way to end a test.
Yeah, it's an example. So rugby is so strange. On a weekend where 7-8 million people were watching with a huge demographic, the perfect demographic in France, watching New Zealand versus the French play.
Yeah.
And you have these great things, both in South Africa and in France. I think those two countries in particular, the rugby is at its heyday. And one thing you can always bank on when you watch Top 14 is fantastic camera angles. Sometimes they're avant-garde, a bit weird actually, but they just show you everything. So we know they had the ability to do this. It's profoundly unsatisfying to see a game end on a thing and then you never see that thing. Just kind of like, so why were you inviting yourself into my living room for me to watch it on my TV? And then at the very end you go, oh, but that's good.
Oh, but it's finished. Oh, okay.
Trust us.
I'm surprised that, a couple of days later, we still haven't seen the obligatory fresh new angles show that Argentina did indeed knock the ball. Like I'm waiting for that story, or they didn't, or they were robbed, and we haven't seen it. And yeah, it's just wholly.
They even have a ref cam on some of these matches where you
Great
doesn't work.
point.
It doesn't work very well sometimes.
Great
It's funny
point.
because they usually use it on the scrum, and
Yeah.
for some reason the ref never looking at the scrum.
No. What you end up seeing is the ref's chest pointing at the player's chest. So
Exactly.
It's not much good. It's not much good. It was another big weekend of the Northern Spring Autumn Series Tour fixtures, a bit that is now behind us, and we are going to get into Australia's thumping win over Wales next. Right next. A reminder too that Harry and I covered the England, South Africa and France, New Zealand games in the latest Test match post-mortem, which came out late Saturday night, early Sunday morning, depending on where you are. If you've not watched that or heard that yet, make sure you do go back and check it out once we've done with our thoughts on Wales, Australia there, and you can hear what we thought about those two really, really interesting, really enthralling games as well. Wales 20, Australia 52 in Cardiff, mate. Australia led 19-13 at halftime. And at halftime, I did say as much on the socials, credit to Wales for getting back into it. Australia led 19-0. But what I said was really need Australia to kick on with this from here. And holy moly, did they kick on with it from there.
Yeah, it turns out that both the examples, the anecdata of the Fiji and the Wallabies, give someone a card and they explode. Unanswered points, 21-17 or something.
Yeah.
There were interesting aspects of it. We have the melodrama of Warren Gatlin, who's now won 6 of 23 in his return to Wales.
Ouch.
And what's really galling for all Wallaby fans is, that one of those 6 was in Lyon and it was 40-6. And I was commenting during the match that it was interesting, the symmetry of really spanking them. And that's exactly what happened. A 42-point margin, bolstered by 3 maul tries and a hat trick by your man, Tom Wright.
Tom Wright.
What did you think about Tom Wright? There's Rian Lowe has a great line. I don't want to mangle it, but it says something along the lines of that Andrew Kellaway is that voice of sanity in his ear or something while he's playing before he has some crazy idea.
Like that.
Yeah,
I like that, and I think that would have been very apt 2 years ago. It's maybe. He's not quite so prone to brain explosions now. He's definitely matured as a player. He's now picking the right thing to do more often than not. But he's becoming so exciting to watch. And he did it against England last week. He did it 2 or 3 or 4 times against Wales. Picks up a kick 10 meters in front of his own posts. Even shapes the kick back downfield and suddenly goes, oh, hang on, there's a bit of space there. And he's become so good at knowing how to get to space, and whether that means offloading someone else, stepping his way through himself, he can just find the space. And so if we were having a 5-word headline for this, it would not necessarily, I would simply have said, Wright waltzes through wounded Wales, because he just found a way of carving them up. And he was given the man of the match and then put the cherry on top by scoring a 3rd try. So it was a hell of a performance. But again, he wasn't alone. He was not alone in that at all.
On his first try, he blew a kiss to the crowd, and it looked sarcastic, like he was doing it just to rile them up. He's still got a bit of immaturity to him. I quite like it, actually. I do think he has a tell. So if I was a Lucy and I was prowling and hunting him down, I think there's a certain way he grips the ball in 2 hands where you just know, like, no, I'm not going to kick. I'm not going to do it. But he's still a handful to catch because he's got a lot of that. He has a bursting acceleration. I don't know what he's like in terms of the actual speed, what his 150 meters is, but he's really good at like an 8-meter burst.
I was going to say his first, I think his first 10 or 15 meters would be super quick,
Mhm.
and he winds up when he needs to be. But when he can go from half gap to full blown line break in 3 steps, and there's not too many players that can do that, and that's really exciting. You mentioned the way he holds the ball, and again I'll just reference that profile piece I did on him, and I had spent an hour or so having coffee with Stephen Larkham for that, and Stephen said the same thing. Like when they're up in the box, there's a moment in the game where Wright will have the ball in both hands, and he actually said when he's got the ball in both hands, we just sit and watch because something's about to happen. We don't know what it is yet, but something's about to happen, and all you can do is sit back and watch because that's when the uncoachable elements take over.
I feel like it's a little gallop, and he has his elbows go higher than most, and I go, "Ooh, here he goes." Tom Wright's getting
Something's
excited.
About to happen. Yeah, it's great. But
on the other hand, there was a guy you were not excited about. So talk to me about Samu Kerevi and his ill-fated cameo. What was that all about?
Yeah, look, I questioned the need for Samu Kerevi in this Wallaby squad when it was first picked. I just don't know what impact he provides now that isn't being provided elsewhere. And he carried a lot in this game, but I don't recall it. He wasn't bending the line like Rob Valentini did, or like Sarah Uru did as well, who was great. Will Skelton was a strong carry. Nick Frost was a strong carrier. Kerevi carried a lot, but I don't think he made too many meters. And so, like, if he's been picked to do a job, I don't actually know that he did it. And then, whatever you think of the card, and I got to admit, I was actually a little bit surprised it was upgraded. It just sort of capped off, I think, a fairly sort of performance now. And so he now almost certainly doesn't play against Scotland next week. And I just think this is the opportunity now for Australia just to get on with the job without him, because I just don't know that he's needed anymore.
So my interpretation of it was an experimentation. I feel like Joe Schmidt has been very lab orientated in the way he's worked through several phases in the Rugby Championship and the first July series with Wales, and now that he wants to see people in the light of day, in perfect laboratory conditions, under his watch, with his training. So in some ways, you kind of rule someone out. Rassie Erasmus has used 50 players, and there's going to be more in this year's tests, which actually is a phenomenal number, whilst still winning. Obviously, the Wallabies didn't have the luxury of keeping the winning, but I do think in your first year you want to see a lot of players. So maybe it was just a matter of saying there is this mythology going around of Samu Kerevi, because in his day he was top 2 or 3 in the 12s.
Absolutely. So but
just taking a look at
point
him.
Is, my point is though that day was several years ago now, and I just wonder. Just so on that fact, so Schmidt's now used 46 players for this year. Dave Rennie used 51 in his final season, and Eddie Jones used 41 last year in whatever that was, 8 games. So that's still a fair number in a low number of games. Dave Rennie used 50, I think, in these last two years from memory, but he had a shocking run with injury too. So he's getting there.
Joe seems like a guy who doesn't trust what someone else has seen or told him. He needs to see himself, and that's fine. It's good and bad, but I think it might be bad actually. But he has to see it himself. So maybe he saw enough, and maybe in a strange way, the card kind of cemented. I thought maybe beyond the card, it was that break where he could have scored and he didn't manage to. And I think if you think of Damien Dialende, or you think of Bundy Aki or Robbie Henshaw, they find a way to find a way to score that match.
Yeah. Well, and I think Len Ikitau would have found a way to score. That's just what I think.
Dynamism, wriggliness, something. The other thing I really picked up on the game was how many line-out steals there were. I mean, there was one gorgeous one by LSL, Lucan. He just went up and took it one-handed. It was unbelievable, the balance and grace and elegance of that steal.
So Wales' line-out win rate was like in the 60s. Like they were being picked off quite regularly.
They lost Adam Beard early, and I think that really decimated them.
They lost 4 out of 12. 1-8 lost 4. So they didn't have a great time of it. And look, Skelton came back in and he absolutely did a job for 50 minutes as well. He was enormous in defence, made a heap of tackles, and was that massive presence in the maul defence as well, which Wales back in July used the maul to actually get into the game and actually put a bit of pressure on Australia in those 2 tests, but they just were not able to get their maul going in this test, which means that that Skelton certainly did a job there. But I was going to say before, just as was the case last week against England, there was so many really good players for Australia again, and obviously Wright's going to get the headlines, but we've mentioned Skelton, we've mentioned Frost. I thought that was Noah Lolasio's best game in a Wallabies jumper in a good few years. I think Schmidt has worked out we can play with width off Lolasio, so he's keeping him relatively flat. He's keeping him relatively stable. He's playing almost like a pivot distribution type role, and then the extracurricular sort of stuff is happening out wider, and the width is it's their way of getting past blitz defenses, but it's also the way of splitting up defenses, which is what they did to Wales fairly consistently, and that brings Kellaway into it. Jorgensen was pretty good there as well. There's a definite shape appearing, I think, about their attack, and it's actually pivotal around Lolasio being that pivot point in the attack, which is actually really good to see. And he's playing with confidence. He ran more, made a few little breaks himself, passed really well, kicked really well. He's growing into this role as much as Schmidt wants him to as well.
Yeah, you would think that this game was always there for the winning, and probably pretty handsomely. Before the tour, I had said that, get 2, it's probably already a pretty good result. But the critical win was against Scotland because they were the bellwether. The England thing just comes as a bonus, and now it resets everything. And now I think you still want to go into Scotland thinking that way. And I think it just tells you more, because Wales has lost 11 straight now. They're the doldrums of their history. There's never been a worse Welsh team than exists right now.
Is that just the professional era, or is that ever?
That's ever.
Wow.
And also there's no relief in sight. They just had a horrendous scandal in their board. So there's morale is down about the administration. Finances are down. There's so many things that are down. So I think it was a boon and wonderful for the Wallabies. But now I think the shit gets real, because Scotland has played pretty well. They almost got a little bit hard done by against South Africa. I think they're going to have a proper test now. And so that's where I'm looking for, if Noah has gained confidence, it will show up across from Finn Russell at Murrayfield with a crowd that really wants, Wallaby blood.
Yeah, and that will be a great test for so many of them, to be fair. Like now there's expectation coming with them as well. Like I worked out early on Monday, that's the first time since the 2019 World Cup in Japan that Australia's won consecutive games outside Australia. And then outside of Rugby World Cups, you've got to go to 2017 when they won the first couple of games in November as well. So, they're in uncharted territory for this playing group. They've not really strung together wins on the road now, but now they're coming to a game where that they have to win, that they have to show that they can win it, but now with the expectation that they will win it as well. And that's going to be the interesting test, I think, for them.
Yeah, they came of all the countries that were going north. They came in with the least demands, lowest expectations. No one was thinking they were going to beat Ireland. The fact of the matter is, now Scotland is now looked at more as a winnable game, and people are daring to dream and say the impossible. I think that's all because of the fact that the England won. The England game was won, and then the way that this looked, the swagger, the inside passes, the keeping the ball alive, it just looked more Wallaby-ish.
Yeah,
And so it's a very strange tale. Like he's one of the most stoic, dour kind of coaches, Joe Schmidt, who's always preached against offloads and has always been a very systems guy. He looks like he's having fun watching his new guys playing. Maybe he's allowing them freedom.
Are going mad. Like they're throwing. There's huge. It's like it must be a dozen or 15 offloads a game now. They're throwing. I think they threw maybe 50% more passes than Wales did, and they obviously had more possession too. But Schmidt has found a team that fits his style, which is actually really cool to see it all coming together. And we'll obviously go into that Scotland game later in the week into more depth in games of the week. So we'll put a pin in it, I think, for now. But there's lots to like for sure.
In honor of this so-called fight that some of us watched this weekend with. That was put on Netflix. I actually compared. I compared
Mike Tyson's
all,
granddad.
Yeah, I compared all the teams that are in the automation series of interest to me to boxers, and here's what I come up with. I've got France's Rocky Marciano. I mean, they're like really good. They don't lose very often, but they don't fight anybody. Ireland is George Foreman, the aging George Foreman with the grill. New Zealand is Joe Lewis. He's still looking very smooth and can bomb you on their day, but got some flaws. England is Mike Tyson, and I'm not sure which era they're in.
Yeah,
sometimes very explosive, but then again, just no interest sometimes. Argentina is Roberto Duran. They have the hands of stone, these invisible knock-ons. Scotland, I'm gonna go with Sugar Ray Leonard. They're very snappy. For South Africa, Muhammad Ali, come on. And for your guys, your lot, I'm gonna go with Tyson Fury. They are a lot of fun to watch right now. There's all kinds of shenanigans going on. There's giraffes escaping from zoos on the loose. And I think you have the best maul right now. I mean, no one else is scoring maul tries. The Boks haven't scored one maul try.
Yeah, but neither were Australia until this weekend.
Well, we discovered it because that looked proper.
Matt Fessler scores 3 tries against Wales off mauls, and that brings the Wallabies sum tally of maul tries in 2024 to 6. So it's not exactly been the land of plenty for it. Anyway,
it's difficult to score nowadays.
Yeah, it is. As I say, and we will get into all the big games coming up this weekend later in games of the week, but. Dan McKellar, mate, is back in Australia, and he's already getting on with the job of rebuilding the New South Wales Waratahs into the force that Australian rugby needs them to be. And I caught up with him again, which is, I think it's his first major in-depth chat that he's given since returning to Australia, I'm pretty sure. I spoke to him late last week, and it is coming up right after this. For our YouTube viewers, you can find the Dan McKellar chat in a separate part on the 89 YouTube page. So go and find that right after you finish with this video now. Cool. This is the 89 Combo Rugby Podcast with Brett McKay and Harry Jones. And, mate, that was wonderful to catch up with Dan McKellar again. It was really enjoyable. We've been swapping messages for months since he lost the Leicester job in actual fact, and it was a conversation. It was a chat that we always knew we were going to have at some point. Disappointed you couldn't get there for it, but these things happen sometimes. You certainly said to say good day.
Yeah, it was a pity I couldn't, but I actually enjoyed listening to the two of you just have a chat. Obviously, you know each other really well, and so that was a cool dynamic. I really think it was an actual chat, so it was. As close as you get to just watching two human beings that have respect and affection for each other, chatting about rugby and life. Because what I keep coming back with Dan is he brings in his wife a lot. He talks about the girls a lot. He talks about being a better man, and that the process of doing something in rugby as a coach could make him a better husband, a better father. And that's interesting. That's interesting today in today's world where it's much more about, wins and the coach talk, but I also came away thinking, is he too reasonable to be a trophy winning? Because they either almost like a bunch of arseholes, or they're like maniacal or strange or weird. Like even like Razor's a weird guy. I'm not saying he's a bad guy, but he's eccentric.
Yeah, sure.
Fabien Galtier, he's a weird guy. Warren Gatland never struck me as a very kind person, really. More of a gruff, grizzly bear, probably, just obsessive. And, Rassi's obviously well known for bear, but even coaches across other codes. So I just keep thinking, wow, wouldn't it be cool if he could pull it off? I'm with Kellaway and Bell and Gamble and Lancaster and Kalia and Joseph. He's stacked, man. He's got
he's putting together a good squad. Yeah,
Taniela. I mean, he's got a really good list to roster.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to seeing how he can make it all happen. And I absolutely take your point about, and he did it several times there. He's always been, for as long as I've known him, he's always been very conscious that his family have made a lot of sacrifices to let him be a career rugby coach. And it's something that he doesn't take for granted. He's admitted that, if they hadn't done that, he would have ended up as a salesman in Brisbane somewhere and, just another former rugby player. But his family's gone along with the ride and he's very much, taken them with him. And as he said, they had a great time in Leicester. It's just a shame that it ended the way it did.
He brought up a couple of times. He was talking about how he that some players are going to be good coaches even when they're still players. But he brought up the idea, but they have to be okay with working on Sundays when everyone else is not.
For 8 hours a day. Yes. Yeah. That was a really good point. Yeah, a really good point. And it will be the test of, Lockie McCaffrey will be the one that we find out about in 2025. But anyway, a really good chat. So hope you all enjoyed that. The URC and the Premiership and obviously the top 14 are still on hold and are on hold until the last weekends of November. The top 14's back next weekend because, France. And we will be back with Games of the Week later in the week to cover off that final full weekend of Autumn Nation Series test. And the test match postmortem returns Sunday evening European time. That's early Monday morning in Australia and New Zealand following Scotland, Australia at Murrayfield as well. So make sure you're all subscribed and following as needed and wherever you need to do that. Headlines of the last 7 days, mate. I think the couple of big ones, maybe the biggest one of all of them, Live Rugby. Is that going to be a thing?
It looks like to me that rugby has been asleep at the wheel. You cannot keep announcing things like we got 700 billion euros from this and we expect to have 800 billion, million, trillion euros from that and announce these giant money hauls whilst players are still making really a pittance compared to their compatriots in other sports. We trumpet someone getting 1 million. Like it's nothing. It's nothing for what they do, for the amount of pain and suffering and G-forces they go through, the skill. Yeah. We are having the best games in the history of the sport. The scale has risen for all the CEOs, for all the administrators. The numbers have gone from 2 or 3 to 17,000 administrators. The money is siphoning off in the wrong directions. We need unionized labor across borders, and we need to be okay with elevating the top players to the proper status. A guy like Ibn Etzebeth, at this point, 133 tests in, as good as he is, you should be making 5 million and no one bat an eyelid. You should be making 10 million. And so what's happening is Capital knows that, and they're just approaching players. It sounds like 2 or 3 by 3, and they're offering them twice what they make. And it's probably not a big deal for Capital to offer because they can devise a carnival tour thing. And I wouldn't, if someone's near the end of their career and they're an Owen Farrell or they're I don't know, just Faf de Klerk or something. They've already done everything they're going to do in rugby post 2020.
Yeah, there's certainly headlines like, the top 40 players are set to make £1 million a year. I mean, that's going to get attention. So yeah, it will be interesting to see how this plays out. The interesting thing to me is that it appears to be being US led and not necessarily Saudi, public investment. So
it's supposedly a UK
it might be
US,
both yet.
Yeah, it's a US and UK consortium. And the idea would be sort of like this 10 to 12 week thing, a traveling circus. It would hit the hot spots like Vegas and Dubai and Singapore, like the old 7 circuit. Yeah. And you would have, these sort of IPL like teams form, best of, all stars kind of thing. And if you factor that in, if you're near the end of your career and you've done what you wanted to do, you thought you were pretty close, it's probably going to be hard to turn down $2 million.
Yeah, quite likely. The other big news from the weekend, or from late last week, was that Brett Robinson was elected chair of World Rugby, a first from the Southern Hemisphere, which still actually surprises me, I've got to say. It was a pretty tight vote from all reports, but Brett Robinson is now the man in the hot seat. And World Rugby then also announced a series of law variation trials will now progress to full global trials. Pretty much all the ones that are in play at the moment, bar the 20-minute red card, they're holding off on a decision on that until after this suite of test matches are being played, which probably makes sense, I suppose.
I was glad to see that the one-stop mall thing was
that knocked on the head. Yeah.
The reason why a lot of these things only look good on the surface, but when you go through what it is instead of thinking what you think it is, and you think about the alternatives for coaching and attack plans, if you take away a maul and the ability to reload the maul in the second and the third, you are taking away a lot of choice that leads to attacking rugby, and you're almost necessitating people going for the poles more. Going to the corner pretty much means maul, and a maul doesn't always keep going on that first move. And so if you are not going to be able to do that, you're sometimes better off not going to the corner. And so you're changing exponentially the trick. If you add into that the fact that when you rid escorts in the pathway, that's also encouraging kicks. You're almost stupid not to kick a lot more on box kicks, because now you have free shots at the people catching it. And you can see that throughout the game. It doesn't make it less exciting. It just means that simple mantras like less kicking are stupid, but more ball and play, stupid. And don't just keep saying that if you take away this or that. Listen, an attacking scrum 10 meters out is the best thing in rugby, right? It's you want to make sure that people have those options.
It's still ball in play. The ball is still in play. So the other one that I was pretty happy to got knocked on the head is the being able to call a mark from restart. That's not going.
Ill considered.
That was a stupid thing anyway. A final thought for the week then?
I just liked watching some of the shape. South Africa beat England with 4 tries to 2. What humdinger some of those tries were. But I looked across some of the stats, and it was such a clean and interesting stat sheet. You had 25 kicks, 75 passes, 75 rucks, 7 offloads. And then you had a very interesting set of line breaks off of very small amounts of runs. And I thought, interestingly enough, it always came down to a guy like Andre Pollard coming on and running that thing. Monty LeBock and fly-offs like him can sometimes create good highlights, but if you want to get a machine running. In a similar vein, I felt like, the French were really economical. They didn't play too much rugby. When you looked at how they created their 3 tries and New Zealand had their 2 tries, the All Blacks, 63% of the ball was in All Blacks' hands. They had 188 carries. But, that's just hard work nowadays.
The French way for the last few years has always been to do more with less. So they've become very good at it.
And it looked very good. And they weren't using Antoine Dupont in the same ways. In a way, it's almost a more dangerous French team now because there's more around it. And it was also clear to me that they have real speed. There were some French players that can just burn. Forwards too. Also, if I was doing jeers this week, I would have jeered the allblacks.com official website, which said phantom neck roll. That was their actual words. And then alleged infringements for everything, as they were describing the report of the game. Guys, whatever.
Alleged infringements that were actually penalized in the games.
In the end, if it gets done, just say it. They were going down a bad road. I wouldn't want anything to tarnish what a great game that was. There was a guy watching with me who had never seen rugby. He just walked in and started watching, and he was transfixed by the opening, the anthems, the scene, and then he stuck around, and then he realized how incredible the game was. And I thought, test rugby at that level, the French against the All Blacks in Paris, there's nothing like it.
It's the best. I completely agree with you, mate. It's a really good point. That then is episode 41 of the 8-9 Combo done. Do go and check out the show notes for the links to the 8-9 Combo on Twitter and YouTube, and now on BlueSky as well. Leave us a rating or a review wherever you can as well, and make sure you've got notifications, auto download settings, and all that sort of stuff all set on. Harry and I remain on the socials in our usual places, and you can find links on our socials for our written work. Harry's on The Roar a couple of times a month. My weekly columns on Rugby Pass as well. This is the 8-9 Combo, the short side set piece combination you didn't realise you needed, coming from the podcast double act you already had. I'm Brett McKay. He's Harry Jones. And don't forget, another test match post-mortem coming your way later in the week, after games of the week as well. And we'll be back in your ears in just a few days' time with another Northern Spring Autumn Series Tour edition of Games of the Week.
Come slam with us. We're on slam report, slam warning.